Okay, good afternoon. Today is day 84, I believe, of making these videos or describing. I think it's day 83 of making little videos of describing day or thought in the life of Schizophrenic Dominic. I experienced schizophrenia, but I do not believe that I am crazy. And in day or diseased, I believe that it's this reality to be experienced. Day 17 or 45 of these videos, which I'll have post on a pinned link. I lost my pinned link yesterday, but I'll bring it back today. Day 17, day 45, I describe why I describe myself as a schizophrenic rather than targeted individual and why I make these videos in the first place. My book will be posted same spot in the pinned posts or to the topic section of these outlets. It's titled Unveiling the Schizophrenic Tradition, and it gives reasons why I may have been targeted, like thought processes, things like that. And it also describes technology which can produce the effects of schizophrenia, like symptoms like voice hearing or feeling stalked or harassed in the public. Okay. So I was going to talk a little bit today. I talk about little things every day and get to document what's going on and get the feedback and potential synchronicity. And the signal, so the signal story about this reporter, Jeff Goldberg, I believe, and he found out that there was going to be a war attack on Yemen from a text thread conducted by Pete Hegseth. And it seems to me that this story is almost like the WikiLeaks story, than my theory about the WikiLeaks with regards to how the WikiLeaks was conducted in such a way that the leak propagated propaganda about warfare or about the State Department that the State Department maybe wanted people to think, and that seemed like it was negative, but if you really analyze it, it's a narrative control thing. And in this case, they're talking about Yemen, and they're saying it's a huge controversy, like, oh, he revealed the war plans to a reporter. This is horrible. This is, you don't do that kind of thing. But it implied, it's implicit in the uproar is that war plans shouldn't be questioned, but just how you conduct the war should be questioned. So it's almost like it's subconsciously putting into people's heads, oh, the war is legit. It's just the way this guy went about it. And so, like, yeah, you should bomb Yemen, who suffered a genocide at the hands of Saudi Arabia. Okay, yeah, you should bomb them, and we should be fighting wars in the Middle East. And so it's not even like a question for a debate. And then the print. And today Chris Cuomo was on, and I was just watching him right now, and he was saying people don't have principles. And the principle we're talking about is whether or not someone used a group chat to plan a war as opposed to some encrypted thing or whatever, versus uh, when did Congress stop declaring war for the presidency to then engage in a violent act? And so the presidency has just become this powerful force for violence in the world. And it's not even a question of whether or not Congress should declare war for the president to act with war. And it's an act of, and even the media right now, they're talking about it's an act of war, and that's why they should be more secretive or something. And it's like, I don't know, it just seems like it's all planned and orchestrated to subconsciously put into people's minds the war is legit. you don't even question the war. You just question about how secretive you could be while conducting the war. And so that's my thought on that today when I'm just getting home, and I think we're maybe missing the plot a little bit. Okay, so I was going to talk about something else here. I always say that I don't think that I am crazy at the beginning of these videos, or I don't always say it, but I recently started saying that. And I don't, I intimate as much when I say schizophrenic is a reality to be experienced and stuff. And so I was going to discuss a psychiatric term back in the slave times, where there were enslaved Africans and enslaved other people and stuff. And there was something called Drapetomania or Drapetomania, and it was a disease that it could be characterized as like a slave who thought overwhelmingly he had an unquenching desire to be free, and that was considered a psychiatric disease in the original psychiatric disorders that people came up with in the old time. Or it wasn't psychiatric. I don't think psychiatry was around yet, but it was a disease that if you, uh, I don't know if psychiatry was around, but it was a disease that a slave, if he wanted to be free, he was considered diseased, and they called it drapetomania. And so I was just pointing out like schizophrenia and some other diseases that we come up with to today are very much in line with that. I mean, you're considered disease when you just have a natural knowing about reality. Like that slave that wanted to be free had a natural knowing, like he wants to be free. He doesn't want to be bound to some southern slave master. And so that's kind of the history of this country. And so it's like that's why I said in my book that like and that I said in my book that gang stalking or the targeted individual plan was a historical cousin to lynching or slavery or whatever. And so I'm not saying that I experienced anything, even when the torture was going on in the early days or whatever. I'm not saying that I would experience what an African slave experienced, but I'm just saying it's akin. It's very much connected to that political history, and yeah. So I was just reminding people Drapetomania. So when you hear schizophrenia and you think like, oh yeah, that person can't discern reality, they're crazy, they're diseased. It's comes from a political history where African slaves used to be considered diseased because they wanted to be free, and so I'm considered diseased because I want to talk about the truth about reality or whatever. So they just call you crazy. All right. So, all right, and I was gonna get into something else here. I was listening to a song. It was just this little thought nugget that I had the other day. I was listening to a song by Gene Autry. It was from this. I was listening to this Disney Park songs because I'm getting ready to go with my family for our little Disney adventure for my dad's and 70th and my 40th birthday. Uh, anyways, but and I was thinking Aut, and this is where my mind works. Sometimes I take little notes like Gene Autry, so Aut, like the idea of you ought to be, I ought to be, or whatever, and it made me think of MLK's uh, thought on the idea that I can't be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking like, man, I'm going to Disney in the middle of like revolution or I don't know if it's a revolution, but like uh it's definitely backlash to a fascist government. So like at least the fall of the republic, and I'm sitting there going to Disneyland, and so I know that's it's a weird conundrum to be because like it's like the happiest place on earth, but like things aren't very happy right now, and so I started thinking about that, and I was thinking like when will anybody ought to be what they ought to be? Or I was thinking about the people fired from their jobs or whatever, like the park rangers or uh, people from civil service losing their jobs and stuff. And I was thinking like people ought to be what they ought to be, and living your life amidst the world not being as it ought to be. And it's a little crazy. It's always going to be that way, I suppose, where like you're going to go you're going to enjoy your life in the middle of while things aren't how they ought to be. And so yeah, I don't know. It's a little weird, but and then I was thinking like the world is broken and it's probably going to remain that way for the remainder of my life. And I don't know if anybody will ought to be. And then I was thinking about like the statement itself. It's a kind of an absolutist statement, and I don't know if you can ever create a society where everyone is what they ought to be, or that you can determine what they ought to be, or how people determine that they are what they ought to be, or whatever. But it's just to me, MLK touches on that. What you can take away from it is the interconnectedness of everything. That everything is really interconnected. That's what I take from it. It's like he was touching on something where he was touching on something like interconnectedness and the interconnectedness of reality. And so yeah, so I definitely think it's a real thing, and he was touching on it. I just don't know if it's like an absolutist thing. If like well, maybe that explains a lot why we have angst as people in society, or as people in society. Like you're missing something because somebody else is missing something. So you are missing out because somebody else is missing out. And so uh this gets into like the individuality, and that's why I don't call myself targeted individual, because I'm not separate from society. I'm part of society, and so what happens in society does affect me and stuff. But at the same time, I'm trying to live some sort of fun life while I have one. And so yeah, as much as I can with the schizo, and then I have the schizophrenia, and that isolates me and keeps me separate. So yeah, all right, Tesla board might axe Musk, and I was thinking, good for them if the Tesla board axes Musk. It's I think that it's literally good for them because their bottom line, and then it's good for them for it's taking a stand against the guy who's giving Nazi salutes and tainting your. I mean, people are calling your cars swastika cars now. I think it's time to oust your leader when he attaches that kind of men, men, mentation to your product. Okay, so as I'm gonna go into another topic here. I just wanted to say that little thing about Musk. Good for them. Good for the board for ousting him. California. I was driving through California on the way up the coast to see Hearst Castle with my aunt and uncle, and we stayed at a place called Cavalier Inn. It's right on the coast, and we got a good deal on the rooms because it was off season. And I was thinking, I don't think I'd ever really want to leave California unless it was absolutely necessary. And then the gang stalkers on the trip tried to recreate the past. They reminded me how bad things were before. And what they do is they follow me around with extremely heavy people everywhere I go, like really fat people to say I'm fat, or to punish me or something. And then they have people stare you down as you like people like these bro macho chisamo men in black stare you down everywhere you go, like make eye contact with you and try to intimidate you. They, as I posted on my thing today, they tried to drag me into a domestic violence dispute today. And so yeah, I'm gonna get into something next time about public lands protests in San Luis Obispo, and I just wanted to say, anyways, but I don't want to leave California because it's so beautiful, and not unless it was incredibly necessary. All right, goodbye.